All right, welcome in everybody. I believe you should be able to see us. I believe you should be able to hear us. If somebody in chat could confirm as we get started here, that would be great. But I'm honored to be joined tonight by Colin Fogle. And for the record, Colin, I mispronounced Rob's name when I interviewed him, so I'm pretty sure I got yours right. Oh, I mean, I'm not using my push to talk. Good call. Everybody else can hear me. You can't. So I'm honored tonight to be joined by Colin Fogle, who is the design director at Midnight Society. You may know him as Skyzen. I got that correct, right?
Yeah, you got it.
All right. I mispronounced Rob's name when I interviewed him, so you're one step above already. So yeah, thanks for taking time to join us, and thanks to everybody in chat who's joining us tonight. Let's start right at the beginning. Colin, if you want to introduce yourself, tell us what you do at Midnight Society, what your background is, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I just said Colin, design director at Midnight Society. I do just about anything design related, which is a large group of stuff. Everything from like high level paper design, like overall structure for the game and all the systems and progression systems and all that, all the way into like the nitty gritty weapon tuning or drop rate tuning, like as small as the numbers go, gameplay feel, working with engineers, basically the whole gamut outside of level design, which Brad handles. So yeah, just about everything, really. And as a bit about myself, I got my background is I was a competitive gamer as a teenager and through high school and early college years, doing tournaments for Gears of War. I was a pro player in Gears for MLG. Had a great time. But we also competed in like Battlefield and just about like every shooter that released for the Xbox 360. Our team, VBI, Violent by Instinct, and ZYN, Amazing, were competing and playing in. We're a top team. So as a result, I wanted to get into the industry and did QA for a while. So did QA on Halo and Call of Duty and uh, Sims Pets and Farmville, anything that, work is work. And then kind of segue that into becoming a designer. I worked at Epic Games on Paragon and then Fortnite. On Fortnite, I did all the competitive esports features since I had that background. So I designed the in-game tournament system and the overall structure for the Fortnite World Cup, which was fun. And then stint at Bungie, and then another startup, and then I joined Midnight Society last year. So I've been here a little over a year now.
I love that you started in QA and made your way up to design, because I feel like that's like a very like a lot of people might like look at that path and be like, yeah, here's a path to do something that really excites me. So what does your right now as design director? What does your like average day at Midnight Society look like?
My average day right now is a lot of giving the team the direction they need on, the details of the features we're working on, or if there's a question of like, hey, how should this work, or what is this trying to accomplish? Like, I'm the guy who helps facilitate that stuff. And then day to day working on content. So whether that's making new contracts or quests or redoing all the weapon balance, reading through Discord and getting ideas for design stuff, and then going back and modifying time to kill or loot distribution or any number of systems in addition to doing design for stuff that maybe 2025 or 2026 even in terms of when that stuff comes to fruition. So really all over the place. I kind of help facilitate a lot of stuff. So that's my main thing, just kind of like keeping everything aligned towards our overall goals and making sure that we don't stray too much.
That's where the design director part comes in there, right?
Yeah, that's the director part. But again, we're a small team, so like really it's everyone putting on lots of hats, and I wear a lot of hats, so I'm kind of all over the place in terms of what I'm doing.
So one of the big things that if people who've been playing, founders who've been playing Deadrop recently, like know this, but for those of you who may be following the game or are watching this later, one of the most recent things that just happened as a new round of testing just began for Midnight Society founders, referred to as founders testing. It's a new test build that founders are playing, And actually, this weekend, founders got 2 invitations to bring in a couple friends. But anyway, in preparing that build and getting that ready for not quite public consumption, but for the founders to test, what was the biggest challenge that you guys had in getting that build together and ready?
Uh, yeah, I think the biggest thing when we're calling the test this weekend pre-alpha, which is like again, everyone has different definitions for
Right.
alpha and beta and early access and whatever else. But the fact of the matter is like this is very much a development build, and unlike if you were releasing something at like a giant studio and it was your big like, all right, we're throwing everything out there, like you would basically stop development and then you spend like 3 to 4 months just like hammering it into the most fine, bug-free, high-performing thing as you possibly can. Uh, our founders tests are not that. Like we are very much like putting the development build into the hands of players with the least amount of extra wasted work. Because I do call it wasted work. Like if you spend weeks fixing bugs and you aren't actually like then right afterwards you're gonna make new features and make 100 new bugs, like that time you spent is generally pretty wasted.
Hmm.
So generally, we're trying not to waste work and just get the development build in players' hands. But that does mean like, okay, we put up with a lot of things that the average player and even like a dedicated founder who wants in on this like early experience may not put up with. So it was okay. How do we get this build into a position where people can play it and they can see the promise of what we're doing? They can like look at a system and be like, okay, I get what they're going for here. I can see the bugs and I can see that like this ain't it.
Hmm.
Like that is totally fine feedback. But we need to get it far enough along that people can kind of assess it for what it is. So hitting that point was like, okay, we want to put the bill up to the founders. Which features and which things need to get up to that bar? And it was like, oh, it's actually a lot. Because when we know what the design is, we don't need all of the extra rails and descriptors and this is what this is. But when you put it in front of players who don't have any of that context, like you have to do that stuff. So I think the biggest challenge was just getting to that point and really like making our list of like here's stuff we need to hit. We are trying to do it fast and not like spend 2 3 months getting things ready. We want it to really be like getting founders as close to the bare metal as possible, without, yeah, like I said, wasting a bunch of time getting a build that's only going to be stable for a week. Like that's the main challenge is balancing the
Right. And that what
getting your hands and getting it fixed. Like that's two things are tough.
wasn't that kind of the like the classic like E3 demo scenario, right? Like developers and publishers would spend like 6 months or whatever preparing a demo for E3 because it would make such an impact. Especially back in the day, magazines would write
Yep.
tons of art, give tons of impressions based on just this one build that a limited number of people would play. But the reality is, it was kind of taking development away from the game because it's really promotion or marketing essentially. It's
Yeah.
not actually like production, so to speak.
Yeah. Now many studios that'd be like I still think studios do this to some extent. Like they'll like branch off the build and be like, okay, this is the build we're gonna keep developing. This is the build we're doing just for marketing or E3 or demo or early access. Uh, and everything that's being done in there, like some of it might come over, but a lot of the work was throwaway. And certainly, like in some games, have thrown away like literally 5 or 6 months of dev work just to make a
Halo
very
2
good
E3, what
title.
was it, 2006 or whatever, whatever
Yep.
year that was, or no, must have been 2004 or something. Anyway,
Yeah. Famously, that was all very skunk works to get what they could together.
speaking of the VES test build, um, what were the big takeaways for the team so far? So we had what, 2 weekends, I think, of testing, and so like 6 play sessions, I think. What have you guys taken away from that so far?
Um, and there's the stuff that like wasn't a surprise, like performance being a main concern from players. Like, yeah, obviously it's a concern for us too. It's one of those things that again, if you're releasing a game for the mass market, like you lock down for 4 or 5 months, and like it's largely about fixing performance while you're fixing bugs and trying to get it as good as you possibly can. So like we knew that was gonna be a thing. Um, So it wasn't really a surprise, but it was a takeaway of like, okay, let's see what we can do to try and make this a little bit better. And that's what the build that we'll have this weekend. Some work's been done to try and improve performance and at least get the like easy wins out of the way, where we can try and get some stuff that like doesn't require lots of tearing stuff apart or having stuff in like a very static state. So performance is one. On the design side, uh, it was the first time getting the rat flow in front of people and like having two distinct like ways to play. So that was going to be something that was like we had the combat tests that we ran over the summer, which sort of were like, yeah, rat versus claw, and there's some differences for movement and health values and stuff, but they have very different gameplay loops within the mode. Like rats are zero risk; you don't lose any items. You're just trying to grab some stuff, get out, and then you get some dust for that effort. Whereas claws are your more traditional extraction experience with someone fully gearing up with stuff from their stash. If they die, they lose all that stuff, but the rewards are greater because they can carry more and keep all the stuff they extract with. So I think like that was something we were interested in. I think it was largely successful. I think people generally appreciated the two play styles. There were a few good feedback threads on things that could be better or things that felt missing. I think the opportunity for us is we have an audience that's sort of split between wanting to be like enjoying all the traditional extraction things, the high risk gameplay, the like more grounded experience, the very loot heavy experience. Then we have people that really come from more of like a battle royale action combat type background to just want to go in and shoot stuff. And the cool thing is like I think having claws and rats gives us a cool opportunity to kind of cater to both of those in different ways. And a lot of what I came out of from the feedback was we can do a lot more with rats to satisfy that latter group. And it's a really rich design space to be able to do lots of interesting things within the game mode and within the gameplay loop. And some of the stuff we have planned, some of the stuff was like, oh yeah, that's on my list. Cool. I we'll get to that eventually. And you just kind of smile when someone suggests something that you already have designs for and you've put on the list. Like it's always a nice moment. And then other stuff is like, oh yeah, that's a direction that we hadn't considered. Maybe that's something we could squeeze in to the future plans in order to get more of that type of feeling of really satisfying the person who just wants to drop in and kill stuff. So maybe that
That's
means
me.
playing with the reward structure. Yeah, I know. Maybe it means playing with the reward structure and like, okay, maybe instead of all of the stuff getting turned to dust, maybe you keep an item. Maybe we just adjust tax rates or change how the fees work or change how guild missions or quests work to help facilitate some of the stuff to make it a more mainline play style, or at least something that you can do 80% of the time or 90% of the time, and then you go in with claw only when you have all your best stuff. So that's stuff that was kind of my takeaway is like, okay, we can do more with rats. I think that's a nice, rich design ground for us to dig into.
That's I'm personally glad to hear that. So great news there. Um, whether it's within this founders test build or just what is it, like a year and a half you said you've been with Midday Society so far?
I joined right after the Vegas event, which I think was October of last
A
year.
little over a year. Yeah.
Yeah, so
What's
like
what
14 months.
Yeah, what's been the biggest design challenge? I know we just talked specifically about founders testing, and maybe the answer is the same, is that kind of duality. But as a whole, what's been the hardest part about Deadrop's development or design?
Design wise, I think it's been answering what a vertical extraction shooter is and like what that game mode means. And I think obviously what you played a few weeks ago is very different from what was in Snapshot 7 in terms of trying to answer that question. And it's still something that we're working on, right? Like this is going to be something that like really is, I know like this has been the line from the beginning is like this is a new genre. And I truly believe that, having been a designer trying to work on this for the past year. I think like it has different problems and challenges than a traditional extraction shooter, but also as a result, it's really interesting and rich from a there's when there's things to solve, the solutions end up resulting in gameplay that is inherently going to be different and interesting. So a lot of our answer to that right now is like, okay, rats are joined in progress, claws are static, and rats come down from the top of the map, claws go up from the bottom of the map. And we have this design space in between those two that we can tell different stories, whether that's in the future getting more AI type stuff in there. So like there's a PvE layer between those two, and you get this nice sandwich of PvP claw versus rats with like some AI and looting arena type stuff in between. Or potentially like when we start playing with future blockouts and the next 2 or 3 or 4 maps, like you can start to add wrinkles to that and do things slightly differently, and like through the level design start to have different flows and mini objectives and things that come out of that. But from a design challenge, like Snapshot 7 had the super lift as like the big pinnacle moment was, okay, and then you're gonna have a battle around this arena, and there's this lift, and you can take this lift and you take it up, and you can be the winner, but not really, because you left the match. It was really the last extraction. And how do you design the match so that everyone's alive for that moment? So you actually have like a cool battle arena, but it's an extraction mode. So like you die, you're out, or you extract, you're out. Uh, so you don't really have that like scripted type of match experience that you can have in a battle royale where the map just shrinks and eventually you will have a 1v1. Um, so it ends up meaning, okay, we can't like script every moment of someone's match. We need more open-ended objective stuff, which is more extraction mode coded. And how do you make that interesting and still give people that moment-to-moment action that we want from Deadrop, and keeping it very fast action focused and not like crawling through tall grass to an extraction point in the field somewhere. Like that like isn't our identity. So that's also something that we need to solve for, is like how do you get fast action gameplay but then have it not be awful when you die in a few bullets, or when you're like chasing someone around you get third partied. Like it's tough.
Yeah, this is very interesting discussion because it's something that I've been talking about a lot and thinking about. And like if you think about the evolution of like battle royale, for example, right? Like for most people, PUBG was the origin of battle royale, and that was a very for most people a very slow, meticulously paced game. Like I remember the early days of PUBG, like people would like crawl in a field for
Yeah.
like for like 5 minutes or something, and like but then as the genre went on, a year, two, three, you saw like things like really speeding up and deviating from what the core original concept was, which was kind of slow and tense and hardcore, to longer time to kill, no fall damage, respawns. Like Apex was the first game to add respawns, and now virtually every battle royale has respawns. And I've been talking about that a lot and thinking about that as it relates to extraction. The same things that you're kind of just talking about. You know, Deadrop's adding verticality to the mix a lot more, and kind of that blend of BR and extraction, which was actually my next question. And I don't know if you have anything to elaborate on it, really, because you kind of just delved into it pretty well. But traditionally, Deadrop's been kind of a hybrid of extraction and battle royale, like what we were playtesting in the past, at least. And then this build, the founders test build that we just played within the last month, drastically shifted things, more towards the extraction route, which it always was planned to be an extraction shooter. So you just talked about it a lot, but I don't know if you have anything else to add as far as like going forward, kind of what's the mentality on the pace of play and those design decisions.
Yeah, I mean, my view is you make an extraction game because you value long form progression and you value the high risk, high reward nature of like bringing in something that you really care about and having that like, okay, this match, like my heart is racing because I don't want to lose this thing. So you need reasons to bring that in for one, and then you need rewards that end up making it feel worth it. And when you do those things and you can tie it into an experience where like, okay, you earn this over the course of 3 hours of play and it really matters to you because like you worked hard for it, uh, then you can just get a heightened gameplay that you can't get from a singular battle royale match. So that's what we're chasing. I think that's why you make an extraction game. And I think everything sort of needs to be in service of that. I don't think that that precludes you from being a action game. I think like you can still be an action game while still checking off that box. But I do think that it gets sullied a bit if you just had lots of respawns and second chances and third chances and fourth chances and fifth chances to like get your gear that you lost back. Or if someone like takes it from you, like if they have to deal with 10 more battles to get out with the thing that you had, like I don't know, I feel like it sullies it a bit. And I think trying to find that line is like, how do you get that action gameplay while still preserving that thrill of fighting for your life and feeling like you really need to survive, uh, is the main advantage. I think Battle Royale, like, we can get some of those elements through rats. I think like the general idea of just, running around killing stuff and getting some cool stuff and then fighting more and like you just go for kills. And like I think that's what modern Battle Royale has become, is like you just take fights.
Oh,
You don't
absolutely.
really like the ratting it out, ironically enough, inside of a building or under a bridge or whatever, sort of old style of Battle Royale gameplay. And I think we can support the people who really want to kill through the rat gameplay. And on the claw side, it's cool because now you get a bunch of like pretty weak enemies that are throwing themselves at you that like you can really rack up a cool kill count without having to like fight 6 battles that are coin flips in order to try to get out with your stuff. Like you can fight more 80-20 battles because rats are weaker.
So 2 things before I forget. One, I didn't notice that rats spawn at the top and claws spawn at the bottom. So I don't know if that was explicitly explained, but that's a cool element that I never thought about. Um, and 2, this is my stream, so this is my feedback. I absolutely want to fight 30 people when I have an item in my bag and I'm trying to get out. That's just me though.
I mean, if we can find a way to make it rewarding,
That
enough
is
to
the
make that
reward,
work for
man.
you,
I killed 30 people with this thing in my bag.
maybe we just need items that gain power based on pulling off something like that in the future, or contracts that require you to do it, and then you get crazy stuff.
A long time ago, I had suggested to Rob, I think it might have been during my interview, that there would be certain like how Apex, well, other games have it too, like Valorant have like Evo skins. That you
Yeah.
have to do objectives. Like let's say you get an item out, you extract out, but then there's a step 2. You got to take it back in, and you got to get X number of kills to get this thing to evolve to the level that you want, and actually get out with it, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Yeah, I think having weapons that level up based on getting kills, and then you have to stay alive with it in order to make it happen. Like that'd be cool.
Right. Um, so before we move on to some other stuff, more stuff about early access and looking forward and stuff. Well, we had to have a question about this, and I feel like you probably hear this question all the time, but there's a lot of questions about the console versions of Deadrop. There's a lot of players out there that want to, whether it's get in on the testing or just know when they're going to be able to play Deadrop. So can you give us a small update on that? And if you can comment, is the early access version of Deadrop still planned for, in your guys' mind at least, is the plan to try to get it on all platforms at the same time?
Yeah, we're still trying. That's still the plan. We have like a lifeline resource on console and just like trying to make sure that it stays at least like within reach of us being able to, switch focus, then get console fully up. Obviously, when we're talking about like performance improvements and working on performance, like that benefits both. And we do design and work on the interface and like how you use menus and loot and combat and gameplay and stuff with controller in mind. So like we're doing things that will set us up well as soon as we're ready to switch over and like really focus on console to be able to do that. It is still the target. Obviously, like when it comes to pre-alpha testing, where we're literally taking a dev build off the shelf, like it's just not tangible for us to try, especially with our small team, uh, to try to also do that testing on console. There's just no way for us to support that right now. But it is still very much the goal. And we are trying everything we can to make sure that console's a great experience when we get there.
Sounds good. And speaking of early access, this has been something that's been both a growing trend in the industry over the last, let's say, 5 years or so at least. And there's there's pros and cons to that approach, obviously. In every game, every publisher, developer has to choose whether early access is right for them. But there's been this kind of this there's a large disparity between different games and what their early access build or version is, right? So like you've kind of got some games. So let me just give you an example. Path of Exile 2 just launched in early access, and it's pretty much a full-fledged finished AAA game. Very very high bar. And you've got
Yeah.
other games, and I'm not trying to knock anybody here, but I'm just going to give an example. Maybe the Forever Winter, which was a kind of survival extraction game, which launched, I don't know, a few months ago. And
Yep.
sorry, Shats, if you're listening to this, I know he's a huge fan of that game, but that felt like a very early prototype of the game, which was lacking a lot of obvious things. And there's multiple things to balance here because some studios are fighting. Well, many studios in the gaming industry are fighting for survival, and they got to get their product out in front of people in the hopes of being able to even continue development. So what's when you think of Deadrop's early access release, which is planned for 2025, what level, where do you think that falls on the spectrum? Like, what are you guys expecting to launch at, with the actual early access version of Deadrop?
Yeah, I think it's hard to, like you said, because there's so many different standards within the industry,
Hmm.
and certainly like team sizes and development time like plays a huge factor on that stuff. Like Path of Exile 2 has been in development, I believe, for like 7 years in some
Right.
capacity. And it's an extension of Path of Exile 1 that like shares a lot of features. So certainly a different scenario than Forever Winter
Right.
in terms like that kind of what I think that's what ends up resulting in a lot of the disparity. Uh, my view is we're trying to get to a spot where all of our core stuff is in place so that you can look at the game and be like, okay, the things are here. It may not be like the most content packed, like, okay, this is, uh, years and years of content development. And I can see that like this is all super, super polished. Like fundamentally, it'd be nice to have stuff far enough along that we can get community feedback and they'd be like, hey, we want more of this type of stuff. We like this, we like this, we like this. This is really working. We can see that it's working. This is not working. We can see that it's not working. Uh, but not have those features far enough along that we feel attached to them. Like, okay, this isn't working, so we can't throw it, but we can't throw it away. We just spent like 6 months, like really making it nice and shiny and awesome. So like striking that balance of far enough along we can get real assessments of it from the community and from gameplay, but not far enough along that it's kind of sacred or immovable, which is the other aspect. Is like, okay, like uh, we've made so much content that it's harder for us to like sock it in specific pieces or change it or do giant overhauls. Like every time you add new classes of weapons, like now it's harder to do a full rebalance of the game.
Like the Call of Duty alpha or beta, right? Which is essentially a
Yeah,
finished game.
yeah, like they're done. Like it's levels that will come in the future, and that's it, or a
Right.
new game mode, something like that. I think like we'll be much more in the space of like, okay, you can clearly see that like we can go further with these features if they are things people like or things that are
Hmm.
working. It won't be like, okay, like you guys have really done this all the way to 11 on on every feature. Like we'll be way shorter of that. But it still needs to feel, in my view, like an experience people can dig into. Like we're trying to make something that is a live service title that can have people playing for more than 10 hours. Like ideally, there's enough to dig into that you feel like you can really get invested and feel like you want to make it a main game of yours that you're gonna come back to a bunch and not feel like, oh yeah, I'll check back on this in 3 years,
Hmm.
when they finish making it. Like I think that's the risk if you're too prototype early
Right.
access.
Right. So a lot of those, gameplay. This is just my opinion. A lot of those gameplay systems that would allow for you know continued ongoing play, uh, you know, are implemented in their earliest versions in the most recent founders test build. You got the quests, you got the contracts, those things that once expanded, obviously you can see, okay, there's a path to keep me playing this game here. So how much can so if people are playing that build right now, or maybe they've been watching it on stream or whatever, how much change do you think players can expect from like what they're seeing in that founders test build right now and then that eventual early access version next year?
It's early access. Um, Probably missing a few more core features that are related to that progression features. But they're funny enough, almost everything is like a derivative of quests. Like quests
Mhm.
are like do a thing, get a reward is like so fundamental. So like us getting that system makes it faster for us to do the, you know, systems that are similar but different wrinkles. Uh, so yeah, a few core features. Certainly more vendors is on the hit list. A lot more content. Like as you saw, there's like 2 quests I think in the build that you guys played.
Mhm.
We'll have a bunch more of those for account quests, uh, items and content and that sort of stuff. Expect way more when you play the builds here in a week. There'll be some more rat loadout options, which we'll also want to expand. So lots more content, and obviously like presentation wise we're like way behind in terms of there's no like flow for unlocking things or like
Mhm.
telling you what your next goal is or like giving you, all right, here's some stuff that you might want to be focusing on or doing right now. Like that stuff is completely not in there, so that's
Mhm.
where a lot of the stuff that we'll probably end up focusing pretty heavily on. We're still working out the like full breakdown of what we're hitting, but that's stuff
Mhm.
that comes for me.
Lore, right?
Lore for
I'm kind of a
sure.
lore
Like
nerd, so
the community, like I've been surprised by how much people really want more lore. Because I'm very much like a multiplayer gamer who's just
competitive
been like,
gamer.
yeah, I'm
So
in
am
there to
I,
compete,
but
be
I
the
love
best and
lore.
shoot stuff, and like I've never gotten into it. So when people are like, oh yeah, quests are cool, contracts are cool, but like give me lore reasons to do them. It's like, oh, okay,
Right.
that's like easy enough.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's really just writing. It's of
Yeah,
all writing is easier than what I consider game development. Traditional game development.
writing presentation. I mean, there is like an aspect of world building and like really getting the like narrative reasons for why you're trying to do the things you're doing. Like that's all important and obviously stuff that we want to dig into more. There's really nothing in the build that's in there currently in terms of like, as you know, like there's no hideout in that build. It's just the firing range. So like,
Yeah.
yeah, your overall progression of like, why are you getting more stuff in your stash? Like, other than watch a number go up, like that's really all we got right now.
Right. Um. So I know we may be getting ahead of ourselves a little bit here, but I have to ask the question. So, kind of thinking about that early access build and Deadrop being, a live service game as you've mentioned, what can we expect to see uh, at least kind of right away for that Deadrop seasonal model? Because obviously over time, I'm sure it's going to change and ramp up. But at least once early access is out there, what's kind of your mentality as a studio for the seasonal approach?
I think I've talked about all this stuff before, so hopefully I'm not getting in trouble with anything. Yeah.
Feel
Can't
free to
talk the
tell us
mod.
anything that you want to reveal to the
Yeah,
world. No problem.
can't talk the monetization part, but I can talk the game design aspect. So one of the things that kind of was the very first thing on my list when I started was wanting a design that was reset friendly. In terms of being able to do like full stash wipes and have that moment where like, okay, new season, like everyone get hype because we're gonna change a bunch of stuff and like you're gonna go through the loop progression loop again. You're gonna get all your first heavy armor, your first exo armor, your first legendary weapon, and uh, you'll be able to go through these vendor mechanics and like the vendor mechanics will have different wrinkles and changes and like I find that season launch moment is so exciting, and as counterintuitive as it is for some people who haven't like played these models, like losing all your stuff can feel good if it's like a big community event and you're getting that sense of like, okay, it's a fresh start for everyone, and we're playing new content, we're playing content that's been altered in some way.
Hmm.
Like just having the, especially in an extraction game where like the haves and have-nots can get like this large large gap over
Hmm.
time. Having that moment where like, oh yeah, everyone's back on the same playing field and like you get entirely different matches where like all of a sudden like no one has armor, so like lethality is
Hmm.
higher versus later in the season. So it was something that I really cared about early on. Was like, okay, how can we design for this format? So the idea is that each season your stash will get wiped, vendor reputation will get reset, um, and that's it. So if you have account levels where you've like completed account quests and you've gotten your account level up and you've unlocked new rat loadout options or upgrades for your hideout. You've like gotten your hideout nice and fancy and like uh some nice aesthetic stuff, like that won't get wiped. We consider that like, okay, that's your account progress, that's your career, that's stuff that is not stuff that we want to touch for a seasonal reset. But your dust balance and your stash and the vendor stuff will get reset, which means we can give you new content for that season. So you can chase after new goals, or you can we can do kind of like little wrinkles on the season, whether it's adding a new vendor with some new mechanic, or adding a new class of item or some kind of collectible type thing that you're chasing after for that season. Just things to keep it fresh and interesting as we go on, so that you don't just hit like, oh yeah, I got all my stuff. I have millions and millions and millions of dust that I can't spend it on. Like, what is that? What is our overall purpose?
Right.
And then we have some other ideas for what end of season concept might look like, and like big, high level, like exciting community type stuff, but don't quite want to share that stuff yet.
right. Maybe like new weapons here and there, kind of thing. New season, new guns introduced. It's always I don't know. I find this stuff interesting. And I love how games you know, like you said, traditionally you're like a competitive gamer, and I pretty much only play multiplayer games myself. But I do love how like games like Overwatch and Apex have embraced kind of this like there's at least some narrative, like a reason for this season happening. You know what I mean? Just to like I don't know. You change the map, it's got snow on it now, and there's just like a seasonal narrative of why there's snow on the map. And I think Quinn talked a lot about how in the future, um, especially given the Deadrop universe, there's a lot of really cool different whether it's just like weather effects that would fit in the Deadrop universe that might not be in another game, or a sector shutdown mechanic. Same thing. Maybe there's a new
Yeah.
sector shutdown mechanic on a map or something like that. It's pretty cool stuff that I could see working well in a season.
Yeah, and even going to stuff like lore and storytelling and being able to like, oh yeah, it's a new season. We have these vendors that potentially be dripping, some kind of new storyline or narrative for that season too. I think that's all stuff that we'd love to pursue. Certainly, like the meat and bones, though. I'm a system designer at heart. Is the
Right.
like, oh yeah, we're wiping vendor reputation, we're wiping stash, we're wiping dust, and then we're throwing new stuff at you.
Gotcha. By the way, Spicy Dingle in chat says let Mayor write all the lore. We'll go back to your guys and some of your comments a little later, and once we finish up here, um, with whatever time we have left, we'll let you guys ask some questions. So keep them coming in chat, and I'll go back and review. Um, Kind of moving, whether it be Deadrop directly or just you as a person, as a creator, in general terms, what are some of your biggest influences, whether it be specifically towards game design or just anything as a creator?
Yeah, I think as a designer, for me personally, again, I grew up with like that competitive background. I found a group of really awesome friends that I ended up competing in tournaments with, and actually the way it worked out was we played Gears competitively and other games competitively, and then we ended up working together at a LAN center so we could play like we worked at the LAN center by day, then we all went into the back room and like scrimmed and ran matches all night for like 4 or 5 hours on the super fast T1 internet. Like it was could really take advantage of it. And then we actually all ended up getting jobs in the industry. So we all ended up out here in Raleigh working at Epic at one point. So I believe really strongly in like the ability for multiplayer games to create these lasting friendships and communities. And certainly like within the Gears of War community, I still talk with, 20 some people that we competed with and we went to events with and we met at these events, whether it was MLG or other tournaments, or it was a small LAN at like a GameStop nearby. Like games have this potential to create friendships and bonds, and multiplayer games especially create opportunities for all sorts of social stuff that is my passion, is like creating communities that can kind of bridge that. uh, so that's stuff that like is always on top of my mind, is like how can we not just make an awesome shooter that's fun to play and that is fun to play in a group, but also like what does that mean from a community standpoint of how can we build that so that people can find their people, whether it's through a content creator like you or someone else, or if it's directly through the game and the games community. I think that that's to me like the really purposeful part of game development that makes me feel all good inside versus
Mhm.
the like business part.
At the end
Like
of the
business is
day, was
different.
you can feel
Like
good about what you're doing, kind of thing.
yeah, exactly. Like that's the stuff that really makes me passionate as someone who experienced that firsthand, and not just with the Gears community, but like I've been a person who's been involved in internet communities since I was like 11 or 12
Hmm.
and have frequently gone out to events to go meet people that I met online. I think that's a really powerful thing for the future. And I think we are losing it in some ways the way social media is structured. So it's even more important than ever that like we find ways to really bring people together around the stuff we're making.
I love that there's been numerous Gears of War references during this interview because I'm a huge Gears fan, but truly I believe both as just as a game and competitively as well. It's a super underappreciated franchise, especially
It's
like
really cool.
the last like 5, 6, 7 years. Like there's nothing else
Yeah.
out there like it, and it gives you that flow state that like most other games, even really good competitive games, can't or don't.
It's what
Um,
has me so committed to trying to make the shotguns as overpowered as the community will let us get away with.
was it Gears 3 that had the insane double barrel? Was it
Yeah.
2 or 3?
It was Gears 3.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, I love seeing that stuff in Deadrop. The AR with the bayonet on it and the shotgun with like the axe, like underbarrel. Like I love stuff like
Yeah.
this.
I think video game combat in general is a lot more fun up close. I think if we can
Yeah,
like bring people in close, it's more fun.
that's something that not to. Well, I am going to shamelessly self promote because this is my stream, but that's something that we talk about when we're making like our live action stuff that we've been doing. And like we're doing live action Dead Drop stuff is like what can we pull from video games? Because like the type of stuff you see in video games is different than what you normally see in a live action film. So
Sure.
like I do kind of try to like look for stuff like that. Like I was playing Max Payne 3 recently, which is an old game now, but there's still like a lot of like really cool cinematic angles and executions and stuff. And
Yeah.
Gears is another one. There's executions and stuff
Oh
that
yeah.
like you wouldn't see in a movie, and not just because of the gore, just because of like the physical act of what's going on screen.
Yeah. It just ends up feeling so much more satisfying versus like aiming down your sight at someone who's 100 meters away and hitting them. Like
Right,
it's
right.
there's two
um,
people involved when you get close, which is nice.
yeah. Um, so this question is a very interesting topic as well. So, Midnight Society from the get go chose a very different path with game development, with the open development and the founders. We're going to bring everybody in to play a build at the very beginning that was a shooting range that ran at, maybe 15 frames per second or whatever. And then the
Was it that bad? I never played that version.
I mean, we might have got 30, 40 frames a second at times, but anyway, sharing a much different path to traditional game development where you wouldn't see a game again going back to that. Okay, developer or publisher spent 6 months building just this because that's all we're going to show the public. We're not going to show the behind the scenes stuff. And I wanted to know, and I'm sure there's a million different thoughts and opinions on this process, both on the team and in the community. But what have been your kind of lessons and takeaways, specifically with the Midnight Society development process? Like, what have you taken away from it? Things that you think have worked really well, or maybe things you're like, oh, maybe don't do this next time, or that kind of thing. Or has it all just been
Yeah.
helpful? Like, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I'll caveat that like I may be the wrong person to talk with because I've only been
Right.
for the last, 13, 14 months. So I didn't get to see how things went early on. Um, it is, I think the main takeaway for me is like, hey, it's really hard.
Yeah,
Like,
that's honest.
not just, like not just from like a development standpoint, but like there's just a lot of things you need to execute on to pull that off really well. And I don't think that anyone at the studio would suggest that we pulled it off very well. I
Hmm.
think like there's been some positives, some negatives, some things that have benefited the game, some things that may not have.
Hmm.
Like I think everything is a trade-off in terms of which things you focus on and the pace at which you go and uh, how you handle getting the community involved and even expectation setting within the community. Like
Hmm.
uh, if no one has experienced this type of thing before and they've only played very polished, actual releases that have gone through the rigors, like maybe shocking to see what game developers actually end up playing on a regular basis.
Hmm.
I think like that's probably been the big thing for me is like, hey, I value getting the community feedback. Like it's super valuable. I weigh it higher than feedback that you would get like just from the internal studio where people are playing it every week and like they're really in the weeds and like they're focused on their focus areas and may not be putting themselves in like the headspace of like I'm just a gamer
Hmm.
giving gamer feedback. So
You also
like
get really burnt out, I would imagine. It's like
yeah, I
like
mean it's like
I've been doing this 40 hours a week for 2 years now. You know what I mean? As opposed to somebody who's a fresh set of eyes and ears, so to speak.
I mean yeah, some days you just aren't going to want to play test, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like they play the same game every day and you're working out every day. Like some days you just aren't going to want to play. So yeah, I think like it's valuable getting more perspective and opinions, especially like there's more people in our audience who are big extraction gamers, for example, than you would at any studio, right? Like, even if all of us were like hardcore extraction gamers, like that's a small group versus getting another 100, 200 voices from the community. So being able to really leverage that aspect of, or even battle royale gamers, like you get the full gamut of experience, I guess, and that's valuable. I think figuring out how to harness that and do it in a way that makes people feel heard that their time is valuable has been the main challenge,
hmm
and trying to figure out how to piece that into like, hey, we still have to make the game, and we still have to get this thing out there, and we can't spend 8 to 10 years in that spot. Like we need to make sure we're making progress towards something that's ready for release. So balancing those things is tough, and I don't know. Some things have been positive, some things negative.
right.
I enjoy the community interaction. I'm in Discord all the time, throwing feedback threads and just chatting through designs and that sort of stuff. Like, I will always happily talk game design. So, like, having a whole group of people who may want to talk game design is nice for me
Hmm.
personally. I appreciate that and always have those conversations. So, I think that's been the really nice thing. And certainly as we get more towards founder tests, like now we have a group who can really test economy and more longer form stuff and like help us nail the progression aspects as we get further and further along. If we can do longer tests without resets, I think that's another thing I'm looking forward to.
So let me ask you this, and if you want to plead the fifth, you can plead the fifth. If you had to choose again, like okay, your next game, you're working on your next game. Let's say it's at Midnight Society. Would you want to do open development the same way again?
The same way as Midnight Society did it.
Yeah,
Um,
like would you want to continue that, or I'm sure there's probably lessons, things you'd go back.
I say, yeah,
Everybody,
like
you'd go
realistically,
back and
yeah,
change this. Maybe we don't announce this, or we don't show that, or something like that.
yeah, I'm not sure. It probably depends on the scope of what you're making. I think if
Yeah,
you're, your team of like 2 to 4 people, then like, okay, you get it far enough along that you can bring in a crowd of 50 people and like
right,
that's your community and now you're building a community.
right.
Versus if you have a team with 500 people and a giant massive budget, like
Hmm.
you can't afford to not be making the game, so
Right,
you kind of have to just go. So I think it sort of boils down to what you're making and the specifics. I think I haven't seen a really large team like throw something truly early out there.
right, right.
I mean, performance alone is like,
Tough.
uh, yeah, I've worked on so many game projects now that like for literal years at a time are just like dragging along trying to get
Hmm.
30 FPS. And you're just like play testing and having to squint through, the performance and be like, I think this can be fun.
Right.
And that's just like how it is. Like
Yeah.
there's not, there's just the reality is like if you're making a large product, especially something that is high fidelity, like you with the current tooling, I haven't seen it work that you can just always have good frames and like
Right.
if you could, then getting people involved earlier would probably be a lot easier.
Right.
If you have a smaller team, you also have less bugs generally. Uh,
I,
maybe that's what I tell myself is like, oh, if we just had a smaller team, we'd have less bugs. But in general, I don't know. Just I guess the answer is like it's complicated.
that's a
The
very
game
realistic answer.
team matters, game matters.
Right.
The community you're trying to foster matters.
Yeah.
Uh, there's a lot.
It is. It is. It's an interesting thing because they're again talking about that. A big gap between approaches because there's some games and hey, some of those games have a lot of privilege, right? Because what Rockstar and Activision Blizzard can do with their two biggest properties in the world is a lot different than But, there's games like Out of Action. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but um, it's a FPS. It's like a high movement stylized FPS, and it's basically a solo developer. And he posts literally like in progress videos like on his YouTube channel every single day. And there's obviously an audience of people who are interested in that, but then there's also an audience of people obviously that don't understand anything except finished full fledged AAA product. And in his case, he's probably looking at it as, well, I'm not, I'm a solo developer. I'm not seeking the same audience as Call of Duty or Grand Theft Auto or whatever. So that's kind of
Yeah.
his niche that he's, like you said, depends on the game, depends on the audience, depends on the community.
It's really different for like a single player game versus like a 16 player multiplayer game where like
Yeah,
performance ends up being way, way more important when you get, that sort of environment.
right. Um, so right now, um, what really excites you the most about Deadrop and the path ahead? At the end of the day, when you come to work every morning, or however you want to think of it, what is it that really drives you forward?
Yeah, I think it cycles back to what I was talking about earlier about making a new genre and like all the challenges that come with answering those questions and solving those puzzles. Like, uh, we're in a world where a lot of games just like copy another game and make
Mhm.
a small change or two, and like that's what people work on for 4 years
Mhm.
of their careers. And like we aren't in that space. Like we're doing something that's very different and requires problem solving, requires finding new ideas and designs, and finding new fun along the way, and things that can make you really stand out. And I think that's, as a designer, super fun. Like that's super enjoyable. It's really enjoyable to be able to like grab that by the horns and be like, oh yeah, let's try this, let's try this, let's try this. Let's design this system so that we know we can iterate through 3 or 4 different ideas as quickly as we might be able to. Uh, and just being in that space where it's very evergreen in terms of trying to find the solution. That to me, being in a spot where we can do that, and I believe we're circling around some really cool ideas, and we've hit on some things, and some other things like we can see like, oh yeah, this will really work. Once we get this and this and this, and we're starting to like build excited lists of like, oh yeah, these three features, these 4 features will like really make this thing. And we've gotten a good grasp of the overall mode. And I think that's the exciting bit, is like, all right, it feels like we're starting to solve it.
Mhm.
There's some stuff that's really working here, some stuff that is close, and as we kind of push towards early access, trying to get as much of that stuff in as possible, so that we can feel the fruits of doing something new and interesting and creative like that. To me, is really fulfilling. I know that a lot of designers don't get to work on projects that have that reality, in especially the modern multiplayer space where like everything is a clone.
Yes, especially in the extraction space too. I'm not gonna name drop any any games or whatever, but yeah, there's a lot of them for sure. I can
And not
appreciate
that
that.
it's like, not that it's not redeemable or that it's any
Doesn't mean it's a
lesser of
bad
a design
game.
project. Like, I mean, like, yeah, I think you can get a lot of good games that way. And I've enjoyed playing games that are just like, you know, this game, but they did this better, or this game, but they did this slightly
Yeah,
different. You
yeah,
can find really good games that way. I think as a designer, it's just like, I would much rather be in the spot where you're solving tougher problems, and you might fail spectacularly, or you might find something that's
engaging.
really, really interesting. Like that's, yeah, it's engaging as
Yeah,
a person who's working on it.
yeah,
And hopefully, as a player in the end product, you can kind of see that same thing of like, oh yeah, this is interesting. Now that I can see that this is different from what other people are doing in extraction.
right. All right, guys, we got a little bit of time left. Not a ton, but we do have a little bit of time left. So if you have questions for Colin, put them in chat right now. I know we did get a couple of them, but they're kind of meme like questions, I think. Olap asked, Goth anime waifu in game when? I don't probably.
I'm not here to talk monetization.
There you go. Um, let's see. I don't even know what this means, but it says, "Does his snake plant have a name?" I don't know what a snake plant is. You've got
Oh,
2 plants, 3 plants in the background.
Snake Plants, this guy does not have a name. Sorry.
Okay. We gotta think of a name for it. How about Pixel? Uh, I'm curious if collecting founder tags will still be a thing in the released game.
The like tags that drop when you kill someone.
I'm assuming the visor cortexes is what he's talking about. Yeah, like lootable visor
Uh,
cortexes.
Not sure yet how we'll do it. Would like to though, through some kind of like collection type
Isn't it
system.
in there right now in the founders test build? I thought it
It's on
was.
the founders build, so
It's not.
um,
Okay.
yeah. So it's on the list. Need to figure out how to do it so that it isn't like a thing in your stash necessarily, and instead goes somewhere
Hmm.
else. It's kind of
That makes
because of what I was talking
sense.
about earlier with like the season resets. Like you don't want to lose that stuff. That's more of like a long-term collection type story. So we want
Hmm.
to get that somewhere else than your stash, which means
Hmm.
we have to build that space where it's going to go. But as soon as we can do that, I think it's something we want to add.
Okay. Um, I don't know what this question means. I don't know what the. By the way, thanks for the first time chat, KMA. Or yeah, I think that's KMA. Maybe it's something to do with a cat. I don't know. I don't know what the 40 question mark means. Yeah. What else you guys got? Colin's gonna answer 40 hours a week. Do you work 40 hours a week? That's the question.
That's Kevin. He works with me.
Oh, okay.
I assume it was 40 hours, something else that we were doing weekly.
Oh, okay. Uh, what else you guys got? I assume you probably work more than 40 hours a week, personally. Knowing game industry crunch
Often,
and stuff.
yeah, usually. It's not work if you enjoy it, right?
Sometimes. Depends. That's the goal, though. I tell people that all the time. Like, no matter what you're doing in life, you know what I mean? Like, if you find something that you really love, like, that's the goal, you know? Then
Yeah.
if you don't feel that way, then you should be looking at something else.
It does make it hard to play video games without also working as you play them in terms of thinking about things. But otherwise,
I get that even as a content creator. I
yeah,
find myself usually not playing many games off stream anymore because it becomes like kind of like a this is how I play games now is to turn it into streams of videos and so
yeah,
when I'm done with that I'm like oh yeah I'm not gonna go play a game now
content build. Yep.
will there be any more founders tests after this was a question and how long will this week's sessions be?
Definitely be more. Don't know the timing yet. I think this week we're talking about 3 hours per session.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
How many people work with you exclusively on design?
Our design team is just me and Brad. Brad does level design.
Okay.
But I
Uh,
mean, design as a responsibility is really like a studio wide. Like when you only
right.
have one designer, everyone's a designer.
Yeah.
So it's really, but yeah, in terms of design department, it's just me and Brad.
Uh, I assume the answer to this is yes, but you may have a more elaborate answer. Are you still working on anti-cheat?
We'll have anti cheat. Yes,
Any?
we don't have anyone internally who works on it. At least not right now. Other than like support for supporting anti cheat.
Okay. So you're basically building systems that will whatever anti-cheat you're dropping into, it'll like fit in, right?
Yeah, it's hard to explain, but yeah, and we don't
That
have anyone like full time anti cheat or anything like that.
I know the old I don't know, was it Snapchat 5 they added it? I can't remember. Had the easy anti-cheat logo. So I think Snapshots 5 through 7 had the easy anti-cheat logo, if I recall. But
I think that's right.
um
It'll be
going
something
back
that it'll be something that we probably visit closer to launch in terms of what we're finalizing. Kevin says yes, so
okay. What does Kevin do out of curiosity?
he's the UI director.
Gotcha. Cool. Thanks for joining us, Kevin. What else you guys got? Now's your chance. Any burning questions? Ask whatever. Maybe he'll give you a Christmas present and answer something he's not supposed to.
And if you're a founder, you can ask literally anything at any time over in the Discord in the variant only channel, and I answer pretty much anything in there. So I, if you think of something later, like you can throw it over there.
Except monetization.
Except monetization, yeah, that's one of the few things that I'm not talking about yet.
I know one of the questions, and this applies to monetization. I know I'm just gonna speak it out loud, so it's said. I know a couple people asked me questions, or they asked me to ask questions in regards to the future of potentially or not, blockchain marketplace type stuff in the game, and I assume that falls under monetization, so you can't really talk about it, I would assume.
Does indeed, and yes.
Uh, will Dingle get his infinite slide back? I'm assuming the answer to that is no.
Nope. But there's a rat loadout option that is a slide improvement, so you can get sort of there. No, it's not infinite.
Did you play during the infinite slide era in Snapshot 5?
Not in Snapshot 5, but we had the infinite slide client side bug in the
Okay.
servers.
Dingle's famous move was he would infinite slide all the way up the ramp up Skybridge on cold storage the entire the entire way.
Sounds cool.
It wasn't. It wasn't at all. It was the most annoying thing of all time. Other than maybe bunny hopping, which was also insane. It's cool in Quake and Unreal or whatever, but maybe not so much in extraction shooter. Mike says, "Thank you for staying active in Discord."
Cheers.
I certainly think that the community appreciates that. I definitely think that there were and are a lot of people that jumped on to Deadrop early on because of the whole open development concept. That was something that was intriguing. And I think that there's a lot of people looking for that type of engagement. So we appreciate the responses and insights. And I think many of us, at least, can also understand that there's a lot of things that could change at any moment. Game development is a complex thing, and we know it's hard to give direct answers without kind of overcommitting or also underselling, right? Both.
Yeah.
So we appreciate the folks who will speak out and give the thoughts that you can give.
Yeah, like I said, selfishly, I enjoy talking about design with anyone who is willing to listen. So it's really not a problem.
Yeah. All right, guys, I'm gonna give you. You got 120 seconds. Uh, or else we'll give Colin some of his night back here.
Yeah, I have to pack for leaving to visit family.
Yeah, you're
tomorrow.
traveling, right?
Yeah, tomorrow.
Good for you. Good for you. Are you gonna be able to be in this weekend's play session? Or
I can't play this weekend, unfortunately. So it'll be
Gotcha.
the first one that I miss, which sucks.
You still get the
But
feedback though.
I'll still be on Discord and reading people's feedback. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, then I'm going to hit you with my last question, which you may have already kind of answered or not. But I mean, looking ahead, we got Founders Test this weekend. I know you guys have said the goal for the roadmap is like early 2025 after the holiday to have an actual roadmap out there. Is there anything else out there that people should be kind of looking forward to as far as next steps for Deadrop go? Where should kind of people have their head and be looking?
Yeah, definitely the test this weekend. As you noted earlier, all founders got 2 invites they can give out to people. So get 2 invites, you can pass them to anyone. We would like to get a good turnout. It helps matchmaking a lot. Like all the rat stuff that I'm talking about, like this is my selfish pitch to anyone who's listening to invite some friends for the weekend. It helps a lot if we get just enough people that you can just search as a rat or a claw. You don't have to worry about being in Discord to be like, okay, match is starting in 5 minutes.
Yes,
You need
agreed.
to be ready. Like, if we just like, it doesn't take many players to hit that threshold, but once we do, like everything goes so much smoother, and we have stuff that like we have logic in place that dictates which rats get put into which servers, and like make sure that matches getting even. Anyways, there's some cool systems that only work if we get enough people. So me selfishly, it'd be nice. But yeah, so that's this weekend. We are going to keep doing tests as well as we can through early January, February, and keep kind of getting in front of people, learning what we can from those tests. Obviously building towards early access, but really like founders tests and being in that feedback loop and passing those threads like is the main thing to look out for.
Okay. How many is enough people? It wants to know. As far as, well, do you have a goal for getting the number of people to play this weekend?
If we can get 100 concurrent, that'd be great. Obviously, we're not doing like a massive push, like we're like throwing tons of advertising out for a build that we know has
Right.
performance issues
Right.
and
Right.
bugs and whatever else.
Is
But
it
if
a
we had
player
100,
threshold to hit the things you're talking about? You know, the
my
test.
math says if we have 100 people, then Claws shouldn't wait longer than like a minute for a match. And Rats will get matches like, almost
Right.
instantly. So that's the goal, is like, oh yeah, less than a minute waiting, and then you can just play whatever you want and not have to worry about being in Discord. So you can just party with your friends
So,
instead of having to sit in the lobby with 40 people
right.
hot micing.
It sounds good. It's one of those things that I try to explain to people all the time, and it goes back to that like kind of player and community education. Because like I always try to explain to people like what we are doing is like actual video game testing. Like this is kind of what it looks like. You know, we're not playing a game really. We're testing a game. And it's
And the
much
closer we
different
can
than
get to it feeling like
firing up
testing, yeah, the
Fortnite.
closer we get to it feeling like playing, the better.
Well,
So
right,
that's
right. But there's the actual testing process is different than playing a game.
yeah, certainly. Yeah, and to a point where like it's frustrating internally when we don't have, we're a small team, so like
Right.
we don't have 100 people internally
Right.
to be able to do that test. So like if I can get it through the founder testing, it'd be fantastic. I'd be so happy.
Right.
It'd be a Christmas gift to me if we sat at 100.
Plus, once you add
So
different skill levels in there and the testing and
yeah,
actually
so
complex stuff.
please, if you're a founder and you hear me making this plea, invite a couple friends and hang out for the weekend.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us. Thanks for giving us your time. Thank you to, yourself and everybody on the team who's working hard to get Deadrop to early access next year. If you have any final thoughts at all, and if not, that's okay. Have a great holiday. I appreciate your time.
No, I think, yeah, just on those lines, the team is working super hard. They really appreciate getting the feedback as well. So obviously I've talked a lot about my thoughts and views here, but like I want to stress, like, yeah, team is really awesome, super talented, and really jazzed to be working on this stuff. And they've really enjoyed getting the founder test going, especially because it's always nice when you can get your stuff in front of people.
Right. All right. Well, thank you, sir. And thank you to everybody who watched tonight or who's watching later on YouTube. And we'll see you in the next one. Hopefully, we'll continue this process, and maybe I'll be interviewing somebody else from Index Society next. So thank you to Colin, and looking forward to big stuff in 2025. Thank you, sir.
Oh, thanks.